Today we are taking the original Xbox and we are going to modify it to fit an HP 110-210 desktop PC inside of it. I know a lot of people are screaming right now, why are you wanting to destroy an old Xbox that you can use as a retro gaming station? Well, we're not going to lose that ability. What we are going to do is, this is a lower end computer. Bottom end, this is what you would have bought 5 years ago at Walmart or Best Buy. It does not have an interchangeable processor. It does not have PCI expansion. You can't put another graphics card in it. Basically a lockdown platform. That's a bad thing, right? But the people that are going out and paying $400 and $500 for gaming consoles, those aren't just a gaming console. Those are computers that are completely locked down. Let's start by explaining what you will find inside your Xbox. First thing you'll find is your power supply. Now, don't open your Xbox, reach in, grab your power supply, and just start touching it everywhere. These are very dangerous, and they should have been in an enclosure to keep you from touching it, but nobody was meant to take these apart, so they didn't shroud these to keep you from electrocuting yourself. And the possibility of that happening is very high. If you look, you'll see a standard PC Molex adapter. Over here is a 12-pin motherboard power adapter. Now, this is very similar to what you would find on a true ATX motherboard, only cut in half. Now, the pinout will be slightly different, but this is a 12-pin, not a 20-pin or a 24-pin that you'd find on a modern-day motherboard. So, first thing we're going to get rid of is this. Second thing you will find, optical hard drive. In 2000, these came with 8 to 10 gigabytes. Let me check my notes here. Yes, this is a 10 gigabyte, 5400 RPM hard drive formatted to 8 gigabytes with the HTPc file system. Now, the reason you can't play or put Windows on your Xbox or play computer games on your Xbox or your PlayStation is because of that, what I just said, the HTPc file system. If you are familiar with Windows XP, Windows Vista, you would know that they run off of a FAT32 file system. The new Windows 10, Windows 8 uses the NTFS file system. That is the limitations of your software being compatible with other consoles. We're getting rid of this. Now, you normally wouldn't throw a hard drive because a spinning optical drive like that, they're not good on absorbing shock, and you can lose data if you're using a computer hard drive and just throw it around. You're going to get corrupted data. The second thing you're going to find is a standard DVD-ROM. This has the IDE input on the back, and that runs off of these cables that you would find in an older style Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows ME computer. Now, the motherboard, if you see, only has one IDE port, and that is because when this cable plugs in, it then splits to your hard drive and your DVD-ROM. We no longer need these. So we'll get rid of that. This board right here is your controller input. This is what you would find at the front of your console where your controllers plug in, these 4 ports here. This board slots right down over top of 2 ports, splitting essentially a USB port into 2, and this USB port into 2, giving you 4 controller ports. Again, we don't need this. Now this looks like a standard motherboard, but it's a little bit modified. You got your graphics card that's under a heatsink, and you got your CPU that's under a heatsink. And I still hear people screaming in the background saying, motherboards out of a console are not the same thing as a motherboard out of a PC. Well, you would be right and you would be wrong. The thing is, This is a Pentium 3 processor. That is what you would find in a 1995, 1996 PC. The only difference is it's locked down using that other format, and you can't install any other operating system on it. You also have your CPU is a 32-bit Pentium 3 at 180 nanometers. Now, it operates at 733 megahertz, which should sound familiar to you if you are familiar with older PCs. That is a normal processor speed. Now we're looking at 2, 3, and 4 gigahertz per core. This is a single core processor, completely irrelevant today. From there, this is basically a Celeron processor with better cache performance. It's got a front side bus of 133 megahertz, 32 kilobytes of level 1 cache, 128 kilobytes on die level 2 cache. From there, we have 64 megabytes of DDR RAM, SD RAM to be exact, and it's operating at 200 megahertz, and it is in dual channel. We have the GPU, which operates at 233 megahertz. It's an MV2A ASIC, which is co-developed by Microsoft and NVIDIA, which makes standard graphics cards for your everyday use computers, your laptop, your desktops. The only other ones you really find are AMD graphics cards, and those can run a little hotter, and I prefer NVIDIA, to be honest, but again, I'm not opted to say that. That's just my opinion. Now, this is basically a GeForce 3 variant, if you remember those graphics cards, and it's on par and operating equivalently with a Pentium 4 at 250 megahertz. The optical drive, the DVD-ROM that I just threw over there because it's completely useless in today's times, is a 2x to 5x is the speeds that it operates at. The display of the graphics card, the output is 480i, 480p, 576i, 576p, 720p, and 1080i. It has integrated 10100 base TX wired Ethernet port on the back for your wired connectivity. Now, that you'll see a bunch of these, and the front header, if you notice, they're all the same color because they are not meant for you to be messing with. They are not meant to be rewired. The front I/O here, your eject button, your power button, your drive lighting, and your power switch is all right there through the same color wiring, and that's where the headache came in. If you are going to follow along with this build guide, you will have to cut and splice these wiring to go with your front I/O off of your standard PC. What we have wired up today is only the power switch, so the power button will in fact work. We have a build guide coming to get the diagram to know the layout of the LEDs, because there's two LEDs. There's two LEDs that will operate in two different colors, red and green. Green telling you that everything's okay, and red telling you there's an issue. We was going to rewire this to show half red, half green for power, and letting the green light be the drive activity light and the red light being the power light. We have not got that far yet. I'm still looking for that diagram, and we will get back to you on that. We no longer need this switch though. We no longer need this motherboard. What we are opting to is this HP 110-210. This is an A4 5000. It's a Mulberry motherboard. It's an A4 5000 4-core 4-thread at 1.5 gigahertz processor. It's got embedded AMD Radeon HD 8330 graphics card. It comes stock with 4 gigabytes of RAM operating at 1600 megahertz, 500 gigabyte hard drive. We are going to keep the 500 gigabyte hard drive because it operates at 7,200 RPM, 7,200 RPM. So we're going to keep the hard drive. We're going to add an SK Hynix Gold S31 SSD. This is going to be our boot drive that we are going to put Windows 10 on. We have upgraded the 4 gigabytes of RAM to 8 gigabytes of DDR3, still opting to run at 1600 megahertz. Like I said, we cannot change the processor, but what I will be doing is removing this heatsink, reapplying the thermal paste after cleaning the old thermal paste off, and applying a bigger heatsink and a bigger fan for better cooling to possibly increase our core clocks. Your CPU can run, even at stock settings, can reach to higher speeds as long as it is staying cool. When it gets hot, it's going to thermal throttle. We don't want that. So we're going to, with these vents in this case, put a fan in the side, which was normally in the back, but we're going to move it to the side across the fence. We are also, possibly in the future, removing this block and changing it to water cooling, but not on this motherboard. This motherboard is only for the HTPc part of this build. We will be upgrading to an ITX motherboard with a small form factor power supply to turn this into a gaming console again. It's going to be a Windows 10 gaming PC in a small form factor build, but at the moment we're just using this board as a home theater PC. It's only going to be good for streaming videos, browsing the internet, emailing, basic text documents. We're not looking for high-class gaming performance here. We did use our soldering iron to change the switch over and solder our new power cables into it. We will be coming back to this to be able to add the LED lighting. So, I think we've touched on all the specs there. Let's get into how you will modify this case to fit this board. Now, I mean, I'm sure you've noticed that this board is so much smaller than the board that we just took out of here. And that is because the old motherboard took up the entire case, minus the spot that took up for the power supply. Sorry, throat's dry. What first thing you're going to do is remove the 6 Torx screws in the bottom. One under each of the rubber feet. One in the center, and one underneath the label at the back. Unless it's removed, you can punch a hole in it and pull the screw out that way. From there, there's 2 plastic trays inside of it. One that held the DVD-ROM in place, the other one that held the 7200 RPM 500 gigabyte hard drive, which we are going to retain. We're going to put the 500 gig hard drive back into the slot, and we are going to mount the SSD to the bottom at a sideways angle. The other tray we no longer need. All that is restricting airflow. This is our front input, our front I/O off of this PC here. We've already went ahead and modified that. The video should be playing right in here so you can see and follow along on how we did the cutting and soldering. You will have to take your motherboard because there are plastic tabs and metal tabs that stick up all over on the inside of this heat shrap. What you will need to do is take your I/O and decide how you want the board to lay out inside the console. Once you figure out how you want your board orientated inside the case, what you would do, the basic input-output of the Xbox was right here. So what I did was modified it and made it a tad bit larger for the I/O of this, and to be able to fit the I/O shield. What you want to do is slide the motherboard in and take a Sharpie, an ultra fine point Sharpie, and go right along the edge of the motherboard to show you everything inside that square has to be cut out. Otherwise it's going to restrict your motherboard placement and make it sit odd or not be able to go in at all. Or even worse, one of the metal tabs pop up and short out your motherboard, making it useless. Continuing from there, you will also put 4 dots for the 4 screw holes, or however many screw holes your motherboard may have. Those you will drill a very small hole, just the exact same size. I believe it's a 1/32 was the size of the bit that we used, and you will put 4 standoffs in place to be able to space your motherboard out of 1/8 of an inch off the bottom of the metal heat shrap. Once you have all those tabs removed, you will want to remove from the PC case the Wi-Fi antennas they should be sticky taped to the side of the case at the top left and the bottom right. And what we did was went ahead and applied them here and here, both the corners, opposite corners, and route your wiring accordingly. We will leave that out to the front, so when we place the motherboard, we can just connect them back to the Wi-Fi card. We don't necessarily need Wi-Fi on this. We are going to be running it with a standard Ethernet cable, so if you wanted to change out your Wi-Fi card to a SSD or an adapter to put in PCI slot to put a bigger graphics card in, you could. This has 2 SATA ports, which is just big enough to run both of our SSDs and our hard disk. From there, we will take our motherboard with our I/O shield, and we will go ahead and place these. Some motherboards come with them already pre-attached. This one does not. So we have to guide it in with the motherboard, because our motherboard will be what's holding this in place. So route your Wi-Fi antenna to the front, make sure it's not restricting your board, and slowly slide your motherboard in place. Once you have your motherboard configured the way you want it and everything lines up, you will take your 4 screws and thread them in to the standoffs that you've already placed into the bottom of the case. We don't want to screw them all the way down. We don't want to over torque them, because they are threaded into plastic and that will strip very easily. So we are just getting the screws started. That way it can still move a little bit. Line it up just how we need it, and then we can tighten our screws the rest of the way down. And add in our 4th screw. Again, do not over tighten these, you will strip them. Okay. Now that we have the motherboard in place, we will go ahead and wire our antenna into place. This is only part 1 of this build. This may end up being a 4-part, depending on 1, we're modifying it now, and we're only going to run the SSD. From there, we will be upgrading to the 500 gig hard drive to install our emulators and our Xbox games, or PlayStation, or PS2, or PS3, or Xbox One, our Nintendo GameCubes, our Sega Dreamcast, our Sega emulators, our Nintendo emulators, and all the games that go along with them. Those will all be stored on a 500, either the 500 gig that came with it, or a 2 terabyte Seagate that we will be ordering. Matter of fact, I think we may have a couple in another build that we might be able to salvage in the meantime. The 3rd and 4th part would probably be when we go to the ITX motherboard with either a Ryzen 3 or the Intel Core i3, depending on how the specifications and the bench tests turn out to show which processor is the better budget and the better performing chip. We'll go ahead and we will mount our power cable to the front I/O. Front panel. Go ahead and slot that in. We'll route that through the front of the case and retain it with a metal tab. Okay. Now, another thing I don't like about these boards is this board out of this particular computer, the HP 110-210, it doesn't come with a power supply. It essentially uses the same type of power supply that your laptop would use. One plug directly into the motherboard right there. That is a 19.5 volt, which is a standard laptop power supply. Usually around 65 to 100 watts depending on what model you end up with. There's one thing I don't like about it, because that means anything that requires power has to run through the motherboard. And what I say that is, this is a standard SATA plug. This is what would power your hard drive or your disk drive or anything that you need to plug in SATA wise, whether it be a fan controller, an RGB controller board. They plug in directly to the motherboard, which just means that's one more thing that motherboard has to do. This particular board has two slots for two SATA ports, meaning one for the hard drive and one for the optical drive. However, we are only going to be using the one for the SSD right now. So we will go ahead and attach that. And we will route that to the front of the case out of the way for now. Okay. Now, all we need to do, since this is a fully functioning PC and requires no external components to run because it gets its power from a power cable and supplies power to everything else, all we need to do is hook up a SATA cable and that SATA power plug to our SD drive. As soon as our SSD boots, the rest of the computer will boot along with it. We don't have to add in any other components. So let's start by opening our SK Hynix SSD. Still in the static-proof bag, of course. These are very good drives. Highly recommended. I usually go with Crucial or Kingston, but SK Hynix is a good brand. I have two SATA cables, and the reason I have two of them here is because I'm pretty sure that one of these no longer works, and I think it's this one. So I'm going to go ahead and plug this one in. I think these motherboards and these types of mods are the easiest way to conceal a home theater PC, or if you can get powerful enough hardware, a full-fledged gaming PC, where people walk into your home and see it and they're just, why is this guy talking about all of his bragging rights about his gaming PC, and all I see is a 20-year-old gaming console. And then they turn it on and you blow their mind with it. That's the type of performance we are looking for today. Okay. Got the hard drive in, got the motherboard in, everything's wired. We've already mounted our case, we've already mounted the power supply, plug in there. So let's just slot this back into place. These are the torque bit screws that I was talking about. They go straight through the bottom all the way to the top. Matter of fact, I'm not going to put these in right now, just in case we have to pull this back apart. So let's get this plugged in, let's get it booted, we'll install Windows to it and see what type of performance we can expect. I believe we found our dead SATA cable. So let's swap this out real quick. So our SATA cable was in fact dead. We are now putting a Windows 10 install USB in, and we are just going to reinstall Windows to the SSD. Windows installations can be time consuming and very annoying, but it's one of the key things that needs to be done in order for your computer to be bootable at all. We will just accept the agreement, click next. We want to do a custom install, and there's our drive. So what we're going to do is just go ahead and delete every partition, unless you have data on the drive that you are wishing to recover. Fresh install is the way we're going. We're going to delete everything. Because this is a new drive and nothing was stored on this anyway. Now we have 232.9 gigabytes of unallocated space. We're going to go ahead and click next. And this is where it will actually go in and install the operating system. As you see, we are copying the Windows files over. Then it will get ready for the installation. It will install all features, and it will connect to the internet and go ahead and grab any updates available and go ahead and install those as well. Then it will finish up, and then you will go through the guided installation of adding your users, your passwords, and setting Cortana up. Now we're just going to finish setting the device up. We'll go to System and Security, check out our system specs. Looks like it's the AMD A4 5000 APU with the Radeon HD graphics running at 1.5 gigahertz as specified. 64-bit. We'll go ahead and rename this PC. Now before we do anything, we're going to go back to the control panel, go back to System and Security, go to Power Options, and we are going to put this in high performance mode. So a quick update before we finish this video. We have downloaded all the latest software updates for Windows 10. We was running on the 1803 operating system, which is, if I'm not mistaken, a year and a half, 2 years old now. So we finally upgraded to the 2004, the 2004. and got all the latest drivers. We are still running 4 cores at 1.5 gigahertz. We are limited by the 4 gigabytes of RAM, which will be in our next video. We will be upgrading to 8, maybe 16, depending on what deals we can find on DDR3 RAM. Our SSD is running just perfectly. Our Ethernet is gigabit, and our AMD Radeon HD graphics are operating phenomenally for the system that it is. As you can see, we can launch Chrome real quick. I can go ahead and go over here and bring up YouTube, see how fast that loads. There's not too much of a hang up here. Apparently I had a key sticking on my keyboard. I apologize for that. Go ahead and select the video here so we can see the quick playback. Already up and running. No skipping, no lagging. Good quality. I can jump to a full screen image. No hitching there. As you see, we're popping through these web pages pretty quickly, loading up pretty fast. We can expect to see some performance gains by increasing our RAM because we are hitting a bottleneck there. But playback seems to be flawless. I can skip through the video. Doesn't take too long to buffer. So if you were just going to use this for Netflix, Hulu, or YouTube streaming, this would be just fine. If you have a bunch of local videos, you can play them directly off of your home server or your local hard drive. Performance is expected of what the hardware we are using. So when we get this updated to the ITX motherboard, maybe a Ryzen 3 or an Core i3, we will update the video and release the content for you. But I could recommend this for a home theater PC that you're not expecting to do any video rendering or encoding of any sort. This does seem to be functioning properly. So if you can get your hands on these components, you can definitely follow along with the video build guide and build this PC. Otherwise, I would recommend using an ITX motherboard and some newer hardware. But if you are limited by your budget, you could have this all for $130, everything included. And then you can find an Xbox case at a yard sale or at a swap meet, trade sale. You can usually find them for $5 to $15. You strip everything out of them and build your computer inside of it. All in all, I think this was a pretty successful build, and stay tuned for the updated version of this and our Aaron's Rent-A-Center build that we will be updating, but I will be telling you everything that I have to complain about these rent-to-own facilities. So stay tuned for that, and guys, get subscribed, leave a like, leave a comment of what you'd like to see in future videos, and we will get them made for you and get them out. Guys, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.